Investors who have focused on gold have done well in the past few years, but to where are smart investors turning their focus now? Diamonds. The value of diamonds is steadily growing. In fact, they've averaged a 15% increase per year since 1949. Don't waste time and money investing in individual stones or coins. Buying is easy, selling is not. Look for many opportunities in West Africa where you can invest literally at the ground level. Mining and exploration companies are opening their doors for you to invest in their current holdings and activities. Gold, diamonds, and precious minerals have never been as lucrative as they are today. Call now for free information and a complete research report on what's happening in West Africa. Call 1-800-998-AFRICA. Call 1-800-998-AFRICA. Get the research you need today to invest for tomorrow.
From the Wazilla Media Studios in sunny San Diego, California, the Big Biz Show is on the air. So great to have you along today. I'm Sully, your host. Hey, look, I've been talking for the last couple of days about AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. Chris Janicus, our director, Curtis Medovich, our assistant director. Guys, put up that website for us because I want the folks to see this. I got a ton of emails on this last time. My emerging markets expert, Richard Steele, in studio. Brother, good to talk to you, man. How are you?
Good. How are you, sir?
Hey, listen, I want to talk about something here because you're the guy that's at the tip of the spear here with respect to emerging markets. You're the guy that can take the 50,000-foot view. Obviously, we're too late for China. China has its own problems. They've got their inflation problem. They've got a natural resource problem. But when you were on the air with us last time, you talked about the similarities pre-China with the similarities with Africa, pre-Africa. When I say pre-China, I mean pre-boom. Okay?
Sure.
There's a lot of similarities now between the two, correct?
Absolutely.
Talk to us about that.
Well, I mean, if you look at what Africa is going through today and you take a look at the similarities and what happened with China, everybody looks at China and talks about manufacturing. Everybody looks at China and talks about, the growth aspects and things like that. But realistically, the real credo for the central government was how do we put 1 billion people to work?
Right.
And that's really what you're seeing in Africa.
Well, and look what happened when they did that, though. When China put 1 billion people to work, it was the biggest class upgrade in the history of the world. You went from abject poverty to middle class. So if you look at Africa, is their main goal now to put their people to work?
Before, you would see U.S. and American companies doing business in West Africa and doing business throughout Africa, but their main credo was how could they figure out a way to basically, steal the resources, steal the assets of these countries. And now you've seen a real movement in the government. They want to put the locals to work. So if you're a big company, if you're a Chevron, if you're a De Beers and you're down in West Africa, the key is they want you to put the locals to work. They want to know that you're going to put local people and, again, raise that middle class like they did in China.
So let's talk about this website, AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. It doesn't get any more clear than that, right?
No.
You guys have a report there that talks about all of this.
Correct.
And I want people to go online and not just look at the information. We want them to download the report, call the phone number, and get a copy of it because it's something that's 100 and some odd pages. The
easiest thing. I mean, whenever you're doing research, and I do research old school. If I look at something on the web and I'm trying to read something that's 50 or 100 pages long, it's very difficult to mark it up and take notes and things of that nature. So, pick up the phone, call 800-998-AFRICA, and then literally make that your Bible research report for the next few years and mark it up, take notes, look at things, ask questions, go on the internet and find out what's going to happen in West Africa, because that's why people miss China. If China were exploding after the real big move in the internet and where material events, and access to information were available, people wouldn't have missed China like they did.
Talk to us about GDP. GDP in Africa is astoundingly large, probably bigger than most people think.
Correct.
Nigeria alone in billions, or 200 billion
in
GDP. Most of this is coming in 3 areas, and I'm going to say, if I remember correctly, oil, diamonds, and gold in that order.
Correct.
Talk to us about those three areas.
Well, Nigeria always top of the list when you're looking at GDP for West Africa, and again, honey crude. I mean, it's very simple. The
Yeah,
world,
this is not
No.
this is not processed oil. This comes out of the ground ready to roll.
Yeah, I mean it's not West Texas that looks like black tar. This is honey crude, and Nigeria has the biggest reserves in West Africa. You look at Ghana. Ghana, if you take a look and get on the internet, I mean, again, get information, read research. You know, you can look at what Ghana's doing for oil and gold and diamonds. You know, you look at Sierra Leone, Liberia. You know, there's access to, for the, you know, unlike China early on, there is access to public companies, stocks that are very undervalued that you can look at today that 3 years from now people will be talking. We'll be talking about it on this show.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The we're gonna, you know, we've got about a minute and a half here before we take a break here, and I think the issue I want to talk about here in this next minute and a half is number one, this is a resource play. Let's
No doubt about it.
But it doesn't necessarily forever going to be. In other words, you can get in now in a resource play.
Mm-hmm.
If we get in Africa early, there may be other market sectors that come up. Correct?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, again, that's how countries are developed. I mean, if you made money in the 20s, 30s, and 40s in this country, it was resources. You were DuPont, you were in chemicals. You were Rockefeller, you were in oil.
Yeah, right.
Once the resources have lifted a country, then you move on to infrastructure. Then it's roads, it's telecom, it's things of that nature.
And
You're going to see
feed-
the same thing in Africa.
And this feeds on itself as well, because if there's a new class shift in Africa, that creates wealth in Africa, and then they start investing in their own emerging market. And then
Sure.
the people that were in early, in other words, the folks that get in now, and once again, you can get this report, Impact Investing on West Africa, very simply stated. You can just go to africaisthenewchina.com, or in fact, give them a call, 800-998-AFRICA, 800-998-2374. We're going to spend some time on that. And the big question that I got last time, Richard, and I think this is something we can answer here, because we're going to take you to the top of the hour with me, is how do we invest in West Africa? That's the question he's coming up. Richard Steele, our emerging markets expert, you're going to be seeing him more and more in the program here. But today, it's all about Africa, and AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. I'm Sully, your host, Richard Steele with me. More from Richard at 51 past the hour. The Wazilla Media Studios in sunny San Diego, California, on the Biz Television Network, CBS Radio Network, Armed Forces Radio Network, and Business Talk Radio Network. The Big Biz Show is on the air. So great to have you along. Once again, that website, AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. Richard Steele, our emerging markets expert in studio here for the Big Biz Show. You'll see a bio on Richard and such on the Big Biz Show website. But this is the report that I'm holding in my hand. Impact investing in West Africa. Now, this is important, and I'll tell you why. You know, many of you know that I made a ton of money in 2008 during the crash, and we made you guys a lot of money. And that's when we started doing stock picks every day. And that's when we were heavy in China. The reason we were good at that is because we got in early. Richard, is there a better message to send than that?
No.
Because you know, by the time everybody else is investing in West Africa, it's too late, correct?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we've all bought $30, $40, $50 stocks. And if you look at a 6-month and a 1-year chart, I mean, how many times have you bought a $50 stock and said, oh, wow, this thing was $4 3 months ago?
Never.
You know, I mean, it just, yeah.
I'm going to drive this point home, too. I know a lot of folks have visited the website. I know a lot of folks read the information. It's one thing to read the stuff on the website. It's another to get this thing in your hand, because you're talking about a pile of information done by third-party research. And I guess my big issue is this: is that, like Richard said, you can take notes, you can look at the markets market by market, and you can do your own diligence on this. But I don't want you to just go to the website. I want you to download it. I want you to call the telephone number. Once again, guys, put up the website for me. AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. 800-998-AFRICA. 800-998-2374. You just talked about investing in Africa. How do I invest in publicly traded companies in West Africa? How does that work?
Well, I mean, you know, like I said, do research and, you know, get on the internet and find out who's there. I mean, you know, you've got Tiffany's. I mean, Tiffany's is a great brand doing a tremendous amount of business in West Africa. You can look at the De Beers. You can look at, the Harry Winston's. You can look, if you're looking at diamond companies, you want to look at all sources. I mean, if you go out and you buy Apple, you say to yourself, hey, I may buy Apple because I believe in their product, but I'm also going to buy all their suppliers.
Right.
You know, if you're going to buy a Chevron, you may look at junior oil companies in West Africa. You may look at junior gold deals in West Africa. I mean, Nugget today. I mean, there's lots of little transactions that'll move, because they move upstream to the multi-billion-dollar multinational companies.
Oracle is a company you brought up last time. ORAC is their stock symbol. Oracle Resources, heavy in West Africa. And keep in mind, you're talking about 15 economies in West Africa here.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a government that suddenly is concerned about getting their people to work. And what that tells me is you're seeing all over again the same thing that you saw in China. You're seeing a class shift. You're seeing a wealth shift. Once again, AfricaIsTheNewChina.com is the website there you can look at. And again, it's one thing to read about all this stuff online. We were just talking about to Matt Pavich earlier today. Matt Pavich is our market expert that comes on every day here. And Matt Pavich even admitted, yeah, I went online and looked at that, but I didn't call and get the report. I want you to get it in your hands because it makes a big difference. I want you to go online and I want you to call the phone number involved there. It is a resource play, but we talked about this before, Richard, in that resource plays are a great leading indicator of how a country is going to come out of a mess. This country, our own country here, would come out of the mess it's in if we could have a resource play like they have in West Africa.
For sure.
Is oil in your mind the biggest? Because I think when most people think of Africa, they think of diamonds. I think that's probably because that's what the media pushes. But is oil really the biggest out there?
Oil's huge. I mean, if you go and do any kind of research on the internet, and you'll see where, President Bush spent the last 3 days of his presidency was at the King's Palace in Liberia. Yeah. You look at where Hillary Clinton and the entire Obama staff 6-8 weeks ago, they're all over West Africa. You look at the officials that are in Washington, D.C. 10 days ago, all West African officials. That's what's coming.
The other thing too is if you invest in publicly traded companies in West Africa, then suddenly you've got a physical presence there.
Sure.
Suddenly you have, oftentimes you invest in companies in the U.S. The physical presence is basically in China, and where they manufacture all their products. The buildings here might be.
Well, infrastructure stems from natural resources. I mean, Texas, for the most part, is a godforsaken place to live. I mean, it's very hot, very dry. Yeah. If they didn't find oil in Texas, in the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, you wouldn't have all these cities that become infrastructures within region. You have to find resources.
The landscape of investing there. I think one of the things that comes into mind of a lot of sophisticated investors, and I know I thought of this, is it already too late? And I would have to say no, because you can't name 3 companies in West Africa right now off the top of your head.
No.
There's certainly Chinese companies that were publicly traded on NASDAQ that were at the top of the issue. How much time do we have here? Is this something we better do this pretty quickly before the secret's out, so to speak?
Well, you have to do, again, I always say this, do research, order a report, and then talk to guys that like you can't do it on a brief show, but you can spend a half an hour talking to John or Danny or these guys, and you pick up the phone, you call them up, and you say, hey, I was reading page 27. What does this mean? Right. And where are these companies? Because these are the kinds of companies that interest me.
And let me tell you what he's talking about. For example, on page 24, he talks about the impact investor ecosystem in West Africa. I mean, it talks about impact investing in West Africa. It talks about mapping the impact that investors have had on West Africa.
Sure.
Those are you can sit through this thing and walk through it page by page. And the reason I want you to do this is to look at, how much money did we make you last year just on our stock picks? 61% for most of our people following on Twitter. The hundreds of buy, sell, or hold calls that we get every year. I'm here to tell you, if we had this type of information, see, the only people that have this information on China were the insiders, the J.P. Morgan guys and Morgan Stanley. Those guys put out the report on China.
Right.
That nobody got their hands on.
And remember, those reports were going out in 1992, 94. I mean, the internet, all the .coms were happening in 2000. I mean, I can remember reading research. Again, they were all printed. It was very old school. It was a printed document, a printed research report. I mean, the internet just wasn't there yet.
Well,
for people to get information.
I want you to copy this report, Impact Investing in West Africa. It's one of those things where you're not going to get all the information on the web. In fact, it's one thing just to look it on the web, but I want you to get it in your hands. Once again, AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. And guys, scroll up there for our listeners as well, because I want you to take a look. You know, the first thing that you see there, Africa is one of the most rapidly growing economic regions with a collective GDP of 1.6 trillion. Boy, I'll tell you what, it doesn't say it better than that. 1-800-998-AFRICA, 1-800-998-AFRICA, or 1-800-998-2374. Richard, we're gonna hear from you next week on our emerging markets, and also I want you to come back in studio and we'll talk about this stuff.
I'll be in New York and I'll talk to you then.
Richard Steele, emerging markets expert for the Big Biz Show, and once again, AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. Good stuff. All right, hour number 2 coming up in the program. I got Matt Pavich with America's Retirement Store. Also going to talk a little bit more about this report here at the top of the hour to our Biz Television audience. I want you to check that out. Our website is bigbizshow.com. Follow me on Twitter at Big Biz Radio. I will give you some numbers as they come up here. I can tell you all the major indices down about 0.4%. Stand by. Hour number 2 coming up next.